That's good. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the History on the Rocks podcast. This is episode 3. I've had a fun couple weeks. Again, joining me 2 weeks in a row, my better half, my wife, Audrey.
Hello.
She's back.
I'm back.
People really liked last week's episode. I got a lot of positive feedback from it.
Me too.
Mostly because you were on it. I think
Obviously.
People really liked the conversational piece of it. You know, like we were talking about the first episode. I didn't even like doing the first episode like that because that's not me. Like reading off a script is like that so formally is not so fun. This is more fun, and just the banter and stuff. So, but last week was great. A lot of people really liked the idioms that we did. Common phrases for those of you who are like me and don't use the word idioms. But it was pretty cool. Today we have a fun one. And I mentioned this one on the show last week that we were keeping it close to the chest, kind of spilled it a little bit of what it was going to be about. There's a lot of information on this one, and it's really good information. Like, the story is so cool, and it's about World War II, which is obviously, one of my favorite topics to talk about in history. I can talk about this. I can make a whole podcast just on World War II, honestly. So today what we're talking about is Hans Scharff, the nice, in quotes, Nazi interrogator. However, we're going to find out that he's not really a Nazi. A little bit of suspense for the listeners, because we're going to talk about some differences in German military and the Nazi party at the time. And because we talk about this with my mom's side, that my mom is from Germany. We still have wonderful family over there.
Yes,
that
we've
gone and visited before, and they've come here and visited. Actually, my cousin Mira, who listens to the podcast, is the one who named the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Mira.
Yeah. Back when I made that announcement that we were putting this podcast out, it was originally called Drinking Whiskey, Talking History, I think, something like that. And then Mira Snapchatted me and was like, here's these two, titles that I think you should go with. And Mira is awesome because she speaks great English. She studies English in Germany, wants to be an English teacher, and sometimes she speaks English better than I do. She is phenomenal. So she's the one who came up with History on the Rocks. And I was like, holy crap. That's amazing. Like, I love that title. I obviously was not in my creative mind of making a title when I came up with Drinking Whiskey, Talking History, but it's the same connotation. So we have Mira to thank all the way in Germany for the name of this podcast. So just a little fun fact history to put in the archive here. What are you drinking? Because obviously we're all trying to let loose. It's almost the weekend, right? And the people want to just sit back and have a drink.
Yeah, tonight I'm not drinking whiskey. I went with wine, Apothic red blend.
Wine night for the lady.
Wine night, yes.
That was like, yeah, it's not really lame. Like last week, I was just drinking Jack and Sprite. But again, that was just that was a safety decision from what we were drinking earlier in the day. I am drinking Blaum Brothers from out in Galena, which they have their distillery out there. You can take tours out there. We've never personally been there.
No,
We've passed it on the way there. Your cousin Kevin got us this for Christmas. And it is smooth and phenomenal. So if any of you go out to the Galena area, Blaum Brothers Whiskey and Distillery, this stuff is really good.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah. You haven't tried?
Can I take a sip?
Yeah, here.
Okay, that's good. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Knob Creek.
Yeah, it is very Knob Creek. If you're talking about a big name whiskey, it is very Knob Creek-esque.
Yeah, it's good.
I like the smooth stuff that's easy to drink. With whiskey, the first sip's always going to be a bite, but like I like after that, as you keep drinking it, like this is like, it's like almost putting down water. It's just easy to drink. That's what I mean.
It still has a punch.
Let's get into this, because there's a lot of information. I shouldn't have read this book.
Why?
I should have just stuck to online research because of how much information I gathered from this book. I was writing this out with all this information, and there is so much that I want to talk about, but I had to just start like whittling out the small things and just focus on the main point of the story. So I did a lot of online research on Hans Joachim Scharff. And guess what? People are going to hear my crappy German come out today. Mira always tells me, and Max always tells me, who's another one of my cousins, that I speak pretty good German. However, I think I sound like absolute crap.
Well, it's not your first language. So, I mean, like, understandable that it's not great, but...
When it comes to speaking German, I'm going to try hard, too, because I really try to pronounce things the right way. And then you're going to hear my voice, like, you're going to hear me not sound like Cody today. I mean, not you. You know what I sound like when I speak, when I can, like, say
it's like
German
when Mom and Romy start talking in German.
Right.
It's like, what?
Yeah. But when I pronounce German stuff, it's going to be like someone else is saying that stuff. So if I embarrass myself with my German, I embarrass myself with my German. But I am going to be a try-hard, and I'm going to pronounce the German words that I'm going to use in here the way a German would. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I did a lot of online research about Hans Joachim Scharff. And then I went on Amazon and I bought Raymond F. Tolliver's book, The Interrogator, the story of Hans Joachim Scharff, master interrogator of the Luftwaffe. And if you are interested in this story today and you like what you hear, I definitely recommend this book because I said I was going to read this in 3 days, and I pretty much read it in 3 days. Books like these are sometimes, like, if you don't know what's going on, it's hard to follow. This book, it's a page turner. Like, you can follow the whole thing. Most of it's written by Hans Scharff. Like, this is from his diary. Raymond Tolliver, over the years, this book came out in like the 70s, and it's been reissued and edited and added to multiple times and republished. I'm going to take information from what I got online, stuff that I got from this book. First, we're going to talk about like who he was, how he became an interrogator. And then we're going to talk about like his method, because this book really does a good job of laying out his method in a hypothetical style, but it's a true story with a fake interrogee.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real story. Like, the events that we're going to talk about of the information is true, but he uses a fake name of the pilot that he's interrogating. So that his point when he wrote this was not to embarrass American pilots for giving up information or making them look dumb because of how he got this information out of them. Okay. Makes sense?
Yeah, that does.
Okay. I'm talking a lot, but I just want to set everyone up for what this is going to look like, because this is an episode that you have to pay attention to the details. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's some really cool stuff in here, and this story is just, it's something from World War II that people don't really hear about often.
Mm-hmm.
A German who's a nice guy, but on the wrong side of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about Nazis, what do we mostly think of?
The Holocaust.
Bingo, right? The Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
The Holocaust, concentration camps, mass killings, death marches, over 6 million Jewish people dead. Hitler, of course. Hitler comes to power in the 1920s. The Nazi Party gains a strong hold on the Germans, because we have to kind of go back to World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, where Germany is blamed for all of World War I. They're embarrassed. They're forced to pay like $80 billion in reparations from the war, which they actually paid off not too long ago.
Oh, wow.
It took them just over like 100 years to pay off those reparations.
Huh, that's interesting.
So that's something not a lot of people know about. So Germany is embarrassed. Okay, they're economically destroyed. Their military is torn down. They're not allowed to have an air force. They have to dismantle a bunch of their submarines. They're not allowed to have this big world power anymore after World War I. So Hitler comes to rise, right? This is the part of World War II that I think a lot of people know about.
Mm-hmm.
They put out all this propaganda that they're going to make Germany
great again.
I was just going to say it. They're going to make Germany great again. We're not talking politics here, but that is really what he wants to do.
That was his goal.
It's Hitler's goal, is to bring Germany back to the empire that they once were. The cool thing about Hans Scharff, and I'm going to get into this more at the end, but he is so well known amongst the interrogation community that the Air Force implemented his tactics, and the FBI implemented his tactics later after World War II and into modern day.
Mm-hmm.
So where were we getting at again? World War I, Germany's blamed. They're embarrassed. The Nazis come to power. And the Nazis have a scapegoat. That's the Jewish people. The Jewish people are the ones that they're pointing the finger at that have ruined Germany. Again, I could have a whole podcast just on that. But we're just grinding it down to where Hans Scharff is in the story. We have Nazis. But what I want to talk about is the difference between the Nazi political party and the German military.
Mm-hmm.
The Nazis started with Anton Drexler in 1920 and supremely were taken over by Adolf Hitler as the Führer. Not all soldiers, not all German soldiers are Nazis.
Correct.
If we put it into comparison, our American military,
Mm-hmm.
if we have a Democratic president like we have right now, okay,
Yes.
not all American soldiers are Democrats.
Correct.
But they fight under the command of a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
This is the point I want to hammer home before we even get into Hans Scharff, is because I think when people study World War II, they don't understand that Nazis are not technically the German soldiers. Okay, the German army is known as the Wehrmacht, and the name of the Air Force is the Luftwaffe. That's the German military.
Mm-hmm.
The Nazis are a political party that you belong to, that are in command. Hitler is the supreme commander of not only Germany, but the armed forces. And now this hits home for me because I do have, on my mom's side, great-grandfather who fought in the German army back in World War II, but he was not a Nazi. Basically, what people don't understand and don't know, if you go back and read a lot of diaries and do a lot of research, is that German soldiers, first of all, did not know the Holocaust was happening while they were on the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
They believed that they were fighting, yes, for the Third Reich, for Germany to become powerful again. However, a lot of them do not know what exactly is happening back in Germany. They're fighting in Russia, they're fighting in France, they're fighting in Italy and Africa, and what's happening with the Nazi party back at home is the Holocaust. And so a lot of these soldiers, when Hitler came to power, there was no choice for them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually applies to our story with Hans Scharff and how he got drafted into the German military, and we'll get there in a second as we go through his life. I want to reiterate that point, is that German soldiers are not Nazis. Many of them, their families were threatened. They were threatened if they refused to fight for Hitler. When we talk about the fighting forces being under the command of Hitler and the Nazi party, all right, we have the SS, which is a Nazi group. They started as Hitler's bodyguard force and then become an internal elite guard of the Nazi Reich, or the Reich is the empire. We have the Gestapo, which is the secret military police in Germany that is part of the Nazi party and Nazi-controlled Europe. And then we have the Einsatzgruppen, who are the paramilitary death squads for the Nazi regime. The Einsatzgruppen, when you talk about the mass killings and shootings throughout Germany of just pulling Jewish people out of their houses and killing them on the spot, that's who they are.
Okay.
Those are the real MNFers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, these are the evil sons of bitches that are doing a lot of the Holocaust killing.
Okay.
Not German soldiers. So, again, you have soldiers in the Wehrmacht, which is the army. You have airmen in the Luftwaffe that are on the front lines. That's the Air Force. So I just want to reiterate that difference before we get into this, because this is why they call Hans Scharff the nice, quote-unquote, Nazi.
Mm-hmm. I think I got it.
I'm sorry. I know, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, is that this is a lot of information I'm putting forward, but it's important to the story.
Yeah.
This is a precursor to what we're talking about. And like when I say Hans Scharff is a nice guy, if you read this book, he is a very nice guy. And he will live out the rest of his days in Los Angeles, and we will get to that as well. But I don't want to spoil that part.
Mm-hmm.
So who is Hans Scharff exactly? Now, you're going to have to keep up with me here, Audrey,
Okay, I'm going to try.
because his father is also named Hans. And this is where their second names come in. So the Hans Scharff we're talking about, the interrogator, is Hans Joachim Gottlieb Scharff. He is born on December 16th of 1907 in East Prussia, Germany, which is modern-day Poland, because he's born before German unification. Okay, so this is still Prussia and an empire.
Mm-hmm.
His father, Hans Hermann Scharff, was a Prussian army officer prior to World War I. So he was an army officer in the Prussian army.
Mm-hmm.
He resigned as an army officer to join his father-in-law's textile business to train his 3 sons with the hope that one of them would one day take over the business. Hans Joachim's maternal grandfather, his name is Christian G. Jahn. Shout out to my other German cousin, Jan. He is a wealthy man who was the co-founder of Botany Woolen Mills in Greiz, Germany, and eventually Passaic, New Jersey.
Oh, Jersey.
Shout out to our New Jersey fam.
Yes.
We've got family all over the world.
And they're not far from Passaic.
Passaic. No, they're not. They're not far from Passaic at all. So this textile business started in Greiz, Germany, which is just outside of Leipzig, which is the eastern part of Germany. And then it expanded into New Jersey after World War II. And there's a lot of, with the Cold War era and East Germany being taken over by the Russians and falling to communism, it really tears the business apart. Hans grew up in his grandfather's villa called Villa Jan. So this is a big, like, family complex. It's a very large estate.
Wealthy.
Very wealthy. Now, this estate was adjacent to the textile mill. In his youth, he went to school in Leipzig, right down the road, and he did not move out of this villa until adulthood. His father, Hans Hermann, rejoined the military to fight in World War I, but sadly he died from his wounds in World War I. However, he received the Iron Cross, the Reuts Cross, and the Hanseatic Cross, so he was very decorated, and Hans was very proud of his father for fighting in World War I and for all of his bravery.
Mm-hmm.
However, Hans Joachim, he has no desire to be a military man. He doesn't want to follow in his father's footsteps. He's really into the textile business right now. He's planning on being a part of the family legacy. Hans's older brother takes over the textile mill from his grandfather, and Hans was also encouraged to stay involved in the family business and be part of it. He spent 3 years training there as a teenager. However, he was then trained in merchandising, marketing, and exporting, which leads him to move to Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, very nice.
And what's down in South Africa is the Adlerwerk Foreign Office, and they are known for the Adler automobile.
I'll say, I feel like I haven't heard of that.
Yeah. There's a bunch of, European car companies that people don't hear of, like Skoda. It's one of my favorite words.
I've heard of that one.
I know you have, because I say it ridiculously when it comes up.
I feel like when we were there, we would see those.
Oh, yeah.
And you would say it.
Yeah, Skoda. It's kind of like when you go, Echo!
Yeah, all the time. I see one almost every day.
Audrey had a Toyota Echo that she was really proud of, and I call it the roller skate, because that's what it felt like when you were in it, like you were in a roller skate.
It was a good car, whatever.
Shaking around. So we're still going here with Hans's life. All right.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to Johannesburg, loves it there. He's so good at being a salesman with his marketing background and exporting background that he actually stays there for 10 years after he is promoted to be the director of the overseas division. When the war broke out in 1939, he was on vacation back in Germany.
Oh, well, that's a bummer.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
If Hans would have stayed in Africa, the story would have never been written.
Yeah.
So in 1939, as Hitler's invading Poland and the Anschluss is beginning, Mac's going to love that I said Anschluss if he listens to this. He's forcibly drafted into the German army that's commanded by Hitler at this time. So again, it's a gun to your head. You have no choice. You're a German citizen, a fighting age male, and you're in it. Or there's that threat of we are going to kill you and your family if you do not pledge the allegiance to the Reich.
All I'm thinking in my head right now is like scenes from The Sound of Music when they get into the war part.
Yes. Okay, so that's just the short background of Hans Scharff and how he was forced to join the Wehrmacht. So now that he's shipped off to his battalion, which is headed to the extreme cold of Russia on the Eastern Front. If anyone knows anything about the Eastern Front, you're most likely not coming back from there. He is standing in a line at attention with his fellow soldiers, and a man comes up on a horse rapidly, runs into the field office, returns with a letter, hands it to his sergeant major of the battalion. He calls Scharff's name and immediately reassigns him from the battalion to what is called the Dolmetscher Company 12, or otherwise in English, Interpreters Company 12, in Wiesbaden, Germany. This is a miracle for Hans because he doesn't want to be a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's going, he's most likely not coming back, especially at these early stages of the war in Russia, where most guys are dying of the cold, not even fighting. But this is like, Hans is like just taken aback, like what just happened?
Yeah.
Now he's directed to take the train to Wiesbaden, and when he gets there, he needs to ask the military information office where Dolmetscher Company 12 or Interpreter Company 12, where they are. Now, if you know anything about the German military, if you know anything about Germans, like my mother, they're very thorough and organized people.
Mm-hmm.
When Hans gets to the military office, they don't know where this Dolmetscher Company is. Okay. And he's like, that has to be a mistake.
Like I was sent here.
I was sent here. I have a letter in my hand that tells me that I am to report to Dolmetscher Company. And the guy in the office has no record of this company. So Hans is baffled. Holding that paper in his hand, he has the assignment. Germans don't make mistakes, especially in this era. So he's afraid that he's going to have to report back to the battalion and go back to the Eastern Front.
Soldier. Yeah.
Exactly. But he thinks about this letter that his father wrote him. His father wrote a letter to each son before he died. And Hans remembers 2 names his father leaves him, and to look these 2 men up if you ever need some fatherly advice or you need someone to go to if you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Those names were the officers his father was friends with during World War I. Major Lederber and Major Postel. He goes to this restaurant and he spots a newspaper article with the title, General Postel wins highest award for bravery.
All right.
So now think about this. He just happens to think of this letter his dad wrote him, remembers these two guys' names.
And he's on the newspaper.
But it's not him. It's his son. This is Major Postel. His son is the general in the newspaper.
Okay.
This is General Postel is Major Postel's son. He knows that his father was friends with a Postel.
Mm-hmm.
Hans goes to the phone book. And I know no one knows what those are anymore. Phone books, they don't drop them off at your door. People don't use them to work their forearms and rip them in half anymore.
Nope.
Right? You just look it up on your Google search and find your phone numbers.
They're non-existent now.
No. So he goes to the phone book and he goes through all the P's and he finds the Major Postel, his dad's friend, lives in Wiesbaden, Germany, where he has just reported to.
Sounds like someone found out he was going to be a soldier and it all came together.
If destiny is a real thing, I think Hans lived out his whole destiny in this story. It's just amazing to me how this happens.
Yeah.
And that this guy that his dad wants, like one of the guys his dad wants him to go to if he's like in trouble or needs fatherly advice, any of this stuff, just happens to live in the town where he was to report to.
Mm-hmm.
He finds his father's friend and he tells Hans that the company is in Mainz, Germany. Because being an old imperial officer and having fought in World War I, he knows that this company was once attached to a local battalion in Wiesbaden, but broke off to become their own company in Mainz.
Are these places at all close to each other?
They are very close to each other.
Well, at least that's good.
Yes, this isn't. So this is Mainz. We were in Mainz when we went to Frankfurt.
Okay.
No, the first time I went to Germany, I went to Mainz. You
don't remember that.
We didn't go there on our trip, but it is very close to that southwestern part of Germany, close to Zweibrücken and where Max and Mir are. It's not too far. And Mainz is the city just outside of Frankfurt. Like it's called Frankfurt am Mainz because Mainz is the river that runs through there. That splits the two cities.
Yep, it's coming back to me.
Right, yeah. Once you start to think about the geography again, you'll remember. So this interrogation company, 12, they are their own entity now.
Mm-hmm.
When Hans finally makes it there, he realizes that these men are not soldiers. They are highly intellectual people that have some sort of multilingual training.
So they're like our FBI?
Not even that.
Like what would they be like for us?
These people are trained in interpreting.
Oh.
So the FBI has interpreters, obviously.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Everyone has interpreters now.
But this is like a separate military, quote unquote military group, but they're not soldiers. They're interpreters and they are intel gatherers.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, these are not like FBI agents. These men are made up of, before the war started, these are teachers, lawyers, journalists, factory directors, people of high education and like social status.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Just like how Hans is.
Yeah.
Because he comes from a factory owning
wealthy
family. Exactly. He gets to know the Dolmetsch company, his duties, and he is then assigned to the headquarters back in Wiesbaden. So he started in Wiesbaden on this whole journey, goes to Mainz, and then returns to Wiesbaden to work at the headquarters there, and where his job is very exciting. His job is to write names on contact cards for the registry and two-hole punch them to put in an index.
I mean, I guess it's better than being on the front lines.
I would rather punch holes than get shot at in Russia.
Yeah, but not exciting.
Not exciting at all. He does this all day, every day. That's his job. But he mentions in the book that he realizes that his life can be worse. He could be on the front lines, in danger. He is so bored and he is so intelligent. He figures out in his head how much each hole punch is costing the regime.
Oh, gosh.
And he makes this joke to a corporal. The corporal doesn't find the joke very funny. He's not amused that someone is questioning the amount being spent on holes being punched in paper. But that's just how Hans's personality is. He's a very witty and humorous kind of person.
Okay.
But this corporal understands that like him jesting was in like good faith. He wasn't trying to be a jerk or anything like that. He just brought it up because he's so bored.
He has nothing better to do.
Right. So the corporal really is impressed with him, actually. And he's impressed with how well Hans speaks English. Because during his 10 years in South Africa, he did a lot of business between England and other English-speaking countries.
And they speak English in South Africa.
Right, they do. There is a lot of English dialect down there, and that's my point. He makes a lot of friends that are in England and in South Africa that he speaks English with. So, being that impressed, the corporal picks him to be one of the 3 interpreters that will be assigned to the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center in Oberursel, Germany. Oberursel is not far from Frankfurt either.
I feel like I need to look at a map.
Yeah. If you pull a map up right now, you'll be able to visualize where we're talking about. But this town, Oberursel, is in a forested area. It's where the mountains kind of start back up from the city, and it's a very remote kind of area.
Oh, I found Mainz?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the other one?
Oberursel.
Oh, gosh.
Ober.
Oh, well, hold on. Let me do Ober.
Ursel.
Got it.
It's like exactly how it's spelled.
So that is northwest of Frankfurt.
Correct. And Wiesbaden is like right there too.
No, yes.
Right.
Like right by Mainz. Just northwest-ish, very slightly west. And then Frankfurt is east.
Like math people think in math, I think in maps. That's my geography mind.
Yeah, and I have to look at a map in order to understand all that.
But I'm glad you're looking at it because you understand the area that we're looking at.
Yes.
And if those of you listening want to follow along, pick up your iPhone like Audrey just did, jump on Apple Maps or Google Maps and look up these cities. They're very close together. So
just look up Frankfurt and they're all right there.
And they're all right there, exactly. So again, this is a very remote area that Hans is now going to, and he's going to be learning interrogation. He arrives in Oberursel and gets familiar with the camp. Nothing that he's expecting. It's not like this military camp where things are, tough and you have terrible quarters and crappy food. No, this is like a really nice military setup. It's like an intelligence office.
Yeah. So totally different from like going to boot camp.
You're not stationed, he is still sleeping in barracks. Quarters, yeah. He's still sleeping in like a barracks. So that's like the most uncomfortable thing. But all the amenities are great. There's great food. There's a movie theater. There's all these things for the people that work in this base or this camp. The camp is even full of women, which is unheard of at the time.
Unusual?
Yes. And Hans even comments that they are very good-looking women.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a positive.
Yes. I would say so. Considering that if you're going to war, you're going to be around, in this time, all men.
Yeah.
And you're not going to see a woman for probably a long time.
So the women are also there as interrogator? Or
a lot of them work
interpreters?
In clerical work.
Okay.
So a lot of organization, filing, paperwork, and stuff like that. Okay. But there's various departments because there's people responsible for all these different things, and we'll get into that in a minute. The first department that Hans is sent to is called the COR, which stands for the Camp Office Reception. And this is another funny part of the story, is that the job he is assigned, what do you think he has to do?
Hole punch paper.
You got it, girl. His job is to organize hundreds of cards alphabetically and punch more holes.
What a job.
Now, Hans, with his previous job before being drafted into the military service, had him spending most of his years in England and South Africa, as I mentioned. So he has many friends. So Hans's attitude, his sentiment is that, yes, he's on the German side of the war, but he has no hard personal feelings towards the enemy, which is really going to help him in interrogation. Because he's not going to look at the pilots that he's going to interrogate as the enemy. He's going to look at them. He's going to look at it as he's doing his job. And that he's going to treat these people with respect and dignity and kindness. And that's why this is an amazing story, because if we were talking about Nazi Germany at the time, if the Gestapo or the actual men, part of the Nazi parties, were going to interrogate you, they were going to shove toothpicks in your nails. They were going to threaten to cut off your fingers. They're going to beat you almost to death to try and get information out of you.
Like what you kind of like think of being interrogated in like general. You're like, oh, this isn't going to be good. We're going to beat this out of you pretty much.
It's just like the movie scenes, right? Where you have a guy tied to a chair. You got this giant dude who's being told what to do by some asshole, right?
Yep.
You're right. Or electric shock. Put the car jumpers to his nipples and shock it out of him, right?
Yep.
No. That's why this story is kind of remarkable and shows Hans's true character, because Hans is not identifying with the Nazis. He is his own person doing a job who has been caught in a bad timing situation of being part of the German army now. And he doesn't hold these hard personal feelings against his enemies.
Well, and it sounds like when he originally was going on the front lines, obviously not thrilled about it, but was like, well, this is what I have to do, so I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Back to the part where he didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
He's in country on vacation, and you're going to serve, or we're going to either kill you,
yeah.
kill your family, something, right?
Why couldn't he just like go back though? Be like, yeah, I'm going.
They revoked his visa. They revoked everyone's travel visa, especially military-age men, out of the country, or else, trust me, in the book, he would have tried. He does mention that.
Yeah.
An acquaintance that he rooms with the first days he's at Oberursel is a German girl who is actually also from South Africa. And this occurs because she hears his accent speaking what is Afrikaner, which is like, the language down in South Africa. That's not English, obviously. She's actually the one who gets Hans into the fighter interrogation center under command of Captain Horst Bart, who is also known as the Big Chief. So this girl has connections within the camp, and she hears his English, she hears his Afrikaner. She knows he's a very intellectual person just from the first couple days that they meet. And she goes and talks to people and gets Hans this role as an assistant interrogator. Now, Hans made friends during this time with Captain Bart's counterparts from when Captain Bart was in charge of what is known as Y Company back in World War I. This is another fascinating story about Captain Bart. I'm going to have to do another episode just on him because he's actually one of the first German intelligence officers who picks up radio signals from enemy aircraft and uses it in intelligence.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
There's a whole part in this book just about Captain Bart. And it is a phenomenal story. So much that Hermann Göring in World War II, who is the head of the Luftwaffe, Hitler's right-hand man, one of Hitler's right-hand man in his inner circle, is so impressed with Bart's work that Göring makes his system the main intelligence gathering system using radio to intercept enemy pilots' information.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. We don't have enough time in this podcast for me to get into it, and that's why I think down the road I am going to do an episode on Captain Bart. It's a fascinating story.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is where Hans is going to get his first experience of meeting imprisoned pilots, sitting in on interrogations, and he's going to actually befriend these pilots as he meets them, and he treats them with nothing but kindness. He would bring these POWs, they're prisoners of war, so he would bring them coffee, snacks, whatever they needed to, keep them comfortable and to build this trust between them. He's an assistant interrogation officer to two of Captain Bart's comrades. They die in what is known as the crash of destiny, as it's called, as Hans refers to it. They are taken up by a German pilot on just for a ride, and they end up crashing into a tree.
Oh.
One of them's killed instantly. The other one dies in hospital.
Not good.
So now, Hans is the next in line to become a Lance Corporal and take over duties. Ready for a very long German word?
Yes.
Vernehmungsoffizier, or in English, the lead interrogation officer.
I say something officer. I got that part.
So without these two men dying, Hans may have never gotten the chance to be
what he was.
To make the legacy of who he was. I put in my notes here, take a deep breath.
Something big must be coming.
Because that's just how Hans Scharff became the interrogator. So we've gone through his personal life, his younger life, how he got to the military. Now we've gone through the part of how he became the Vernehmungsoffizier.
Okay.
Now let's get into why Hans Scharff is so significant in the intelligence world and why he has become a legacy of an interrogator.
I'm ready.
He's a nice guy. And we just talked about how interrogations, how we know them in Hollywood and how we know them from history, is that they're usually very brutal. And you are waterboarding in recent times, yes, by the CIA with terrorism. They're a lot of interrogations are life-threatening tactics to the adversary to get information out, right?
Yep. If you don't tell us, we're going to kill you.
Right.
Or you're going to go through lots of pain, so we'll just beat it out of you.
Exactly. Hans does not believe in physical abuse or psychological torture in order to get any information, as many Nazis do in World War II. He uses a lot of empathy and kindness to root out some of the most sensitive information from his prisoners, and he was a master manipulator in which he would gain the nicknames of Poker Face and Stone Face for how good he was at his job. And you're going to understand those names a little bit more as we get into his methods. German intelligence at this time is unbelievable, meaning they are so good at gathering information and keeping it organized that basically when Hans enters a room, he already knows all the answers to the questions he's about to ask.
Oh, wow.
But he needs to get the pilots he is interviewing to talk, to fill in some of the blanks. And Hans mostly gets his information from these other departments at Oberursel camp, which is also known as Auswertestelle West, which means evaluation point.
Okay.
He's evaluating the pilots that are imprisoned. So these other departments, they're specializing in collecting information such as down pilots' names, their tactics, location of their home base, much more. All this information that interrogators can use, especially on other pilots that are coming through this camp. And now it's also important to understand that every single enemy pilot of the Germans comes through this camp, no matter where they were shot down. So it doesn't matter if they were shot down over Germany. It doesn't matter if they were shot down over Italy. Wherever a pilot is captured, they are transported to Auswertestelle.
Why is that?
Because this is the one and only place that interrogates air forces of the Allied powers.
Okay.
Again, German organization. If you only have one place to interview people, nothing can get messed up.
That's true. Keep it simple.
We talked about Captain Bart earlier and that Y company. There is the Y department who gets their name after his invention and tactics of listening to radio transmissions of enemy pilots to learn more about them. So when they inevitably end up coming through Oberursel, they have all the information ready for the interrogators. Now, interrogators could also tell a lot about a new POW entering Oberursel because of their personal effects and the things recovered at the crash site. For example, American airmen had an escape pack filled with things they could use to survive behind enemy lines if they were shot down or crashed. They had photos of themselves in civilian clothing, mostly French clothing, a change of clothes to make them look like French civilians, money from many different countries that they can use to barter with, a compass sewn into their pants, and other items like that.
So those were the Americans.
That's just the Americans.
Okay.
So our State Department ahead of time provided these packs that these pilots had in their aircraft, that if they ever had to ditch the plane or if they crashed and survived, that they would have things that could help them not identify as an American pilot behind enemy lines and be captured.
Now I'm thinking Pearl Harbor. I'm like thinking all these things in my head now that we're talking about war.
100%, because you're thinking about all the World War II movies, and Pearl Harbor is fantastic.
Oh, it's so good. Like when they crash down and they're in the middle of that field, and it's not good.
Unfortunately, that's the whole other side of the war in the Pacific.
I know that.
I know you do.
But that's just like what comes into my head.
So those type of pilots, Ben Affleck and your boyfriend, Josh Hartnett, those pilots would have had these types of packs so that they could try to disguise themselves behind enemy lines, had all different types of money, depending, what country they were in. It's not the day of the euro, so all European countries have their own currency still back in World War II. German intelligence is so good, that the major in charge of collecting what they call the booty, right, like pirate booty, could tell exactly what English base these pilots had come from based on the background of the photographs and the clothes the pilots were wearing. So, no, here's the thing. The intelligence is so good that the photographers at these airfields in England, where many of the Americans took off from, they're using the same backgrounds, the same clothes to take these pictures that are in these escape packs. And the Germans are so good at interviewing that they've realized that these pilots are coming from the same place and their photos look exactly the same.
Oh, jeez.
Once they are satisfied with the information that they get from these pilots, the pilots are moved to a special POW camp. Now, Hans talks about 3 phases of his interrogation. The first is simply getting the POW to talk. They know going in that their enemy has a strict code of conduct, but they need to break the ice.
Build some rapport.
Hey, just like a teacher. You build a rapport.
Like a counselor.
I'm sorry. Yes, I know. Just like educators. How
yes,
about that?
Educators. Yes.
I'll meet you in the middle.
Yep.
Just like educators. We build rapport with kids all the time, and we get them to open up to us and trust us. Not that we're trying to manipulate them like an interrogator, but the same kind of thing. We want to get to know them. We want them to be able to talk to us.
They're more likely to do what they need to do if you get to know them.
Phase 2, getting the POW to reveal military secrets without even knowing they have done so. And phase 3, writing the evaluation that is useful to higher ranking officers and departments. If there's information that is meaningless or not useful, then the interrogation is just a waste of time and resources. The best example given by Scharff is an interrogation that involves true details but a fake pilot name. So he basically puts multiple interrogations into one long interrogation to get his point across of how he works. So for the sake of getting to this interrogation example, I don't want to confuse people listening. I'm going to refer to the POW that he's interrogating as the pilot.
Okay. The pilot.
He's not going to have a name. I'm just going to refer to him as the pilot. So first, our guard delivers the pilot from what's called the cooler. And the cooler is the prison cell block that the detainees are kept in before they're brought to the interrogation room.
Yeah.
And they call it the cooler because it's the place where they want their prisoners to cool down and think about things. Hans introduces himself, offers every pilot a cigarette, and assures them that they're not drugged and that they're actually made in Holland to the likings of American smokers. Hans then asks the pilot which brand he prefers most, in which the pilot responds, "Sorry, sir, I can only give my rank, my name, and serial number." And now the serial number is the serial number given to him on his dog tags by the U.S. military, his identification code, basically.
Okay.
So Hans is trying to build rapport right off the bat with cigarettes.
Yep. Give them what they want.
And he's just trying to ask him, "Hey, what's your favorite brand back home?" And the pilot says, "Sorry, sir, I can only give my rank, my name, and my serial number." Hans responds by assuring him he knows the information given, but that he cannot release the pilot to a proper POW camp without fully identifying him. So Hans is saying, "I know your rank, your name, and your serial number already, but I need you to fill in these boxes here, more information, so we can get this process over with, and I can get you out of here to the POW camp where you're going to be more comfortable, and you'll be able to have the Red Cross to give you rations and real food and different types of cigarettes, things like that." Okay? So Hans is trying to build more rapport by letting the pilot know that his orders are useless in this interrogation and starts talking about an American printed magazine and the funny comics in them. So he starts talking about American comics, trying to, again, build rapport, try to have some humor.
Yep.
Pilot, again, only replies with his rank, name, and serial number.
Because that's all the information he can give.
Now, the pilot is under the impression that he is only to abide by the Geneva Convention, which are the humanitarian wartime rules. However, Hans is witty and very intelligent. He also knows that the Geneva Convention also has an article in it in which a POW must also give their home address as identifiable information. Why do you think they would have to give their home address?
Why they would have to, or why the interrogator would want to know it?
Through the Geneva Convention, why would someone being interrogated want to give their home address to the enemy.
I mean, so people would know where they're at?
Exactly. It's so that they're able to tell the American War Department that this person is a POW, but they are safe, and that...
We have them, yeah.
Exactly. Hans nicely asks if he would oblige to at least give him that, and the pilot refuses again to give Hans anything more than his rank, name, and serial number. Hans goes right at him and rattles off a bunch of other questions like, are you in good health? Who is your next of kin? Personal information to help Hans identify that this is an American pilot and not a French civilian.
Wouldn't, pretty much right away, you're definitely American and not French just by the way you're talking?
You would think so. And that's where I kind of was getting sidetracked with this and thinking the kind of same thing. However, there is the point of where Hans needs to know that this person is in the right place being interrogated as an American fighter pilot and not someone who needs to be transported elsewhere to a civilian camp or to another type of military camp if they are just a soldier and not a pilot. Because remember, only pilots and airmen come through here.
Yeah.
Hans notices the pilot keeps looking at these postcards on his desk, and Hans offers to let him see them. They're written by American fighter pilots, and they're going to be sent to their families to let them know they are alive. Now, these pilots have already gone through the interrogation. They've already been sent off to the POW camp. Hans explains that these men went through the process and will be going to the comfortable POW camp. However, the pilot again refuses to give any more information and is adamant that Hans will get nothing out of him.
Okay, we'll see.
We'll see. Many pilots after the war who were interrogated by Hans admitted that they thought they gave up nothing.
They gave up everything.
He always got something. The joke between these pilots that Scharff had interviewed, they always said that he could get infidelity out of a nun.
Alrighty.
As the pilot sat smoking a cigarette, a package is delivered to Hans in the room. It's a loaf of bread from his wife, which he claims is the finest Boston baked bread between Cape Town and Hamburg. So Hans's wife.
Okay.
She sends him food that she makes, and Hans shares it with his prisoners.
Yeah, because he's nice and kind. He will share his food.
Even the pilot agrees that this is some of the best bread he's ever had. They finish this loaf. The conversation turns to the pilot's accommodations in the cooler, where he's complaining about there being fleas.
Oh.
However, Hans points out that the fleas are from American airmen, not Germans in the camp. Hans offers to write the pilot a daily permission slip to take a bath, but the pilot instantly counters, stating he is appreciative of the bath permission, but won't give any information in return for the gesture.
Thanks for the bath, but still no.
Not giving you anything, even though you're being nice to me, sharing bread, and offering me to take a bath while there's fleas in my cell.
I will definitely take bread in a bath. Sounds great.
Bread, wine, and bath for you.
Yes. I'm in. No fleas, though.
Hans, with his witty demeanor, immediately assures the pilot, in a sarcastic way, that he is not asking him to trade a bath for military secrets. This is how Hans does his rapport building.
Yep. The humor.
He even says this interaction about this bath and military secrets is very in jest, that even the pilot is smiling, laughing, very loose.
Yeah.
And he's using this wit in his inquiries for that rapport and trust building. He tells the pilot he doesn't need to stay in Oberrussel camp long because he's sure a pilot like himself does not have crazy military secrets, and this is a simple process to identify him and send him on his way to that permanent POW camp. He asks if he considers the information on his aircraft, like the insignias, the numbers, the letters, right? He asks the pilot if he thinks those are secretive, in which the pilot responds that, yes, they are. And Hans jokingly points out the ridiculousness of that statement and jokingly asks, why would they paint them so large for everyone to see if they were a secret? And the pilot states, again, that he will only give him his name, his rank, and his serial number.
But he already gave him something right there, right? Like, he said they're secret.
But they're not. And that's why Hans is joking about it, because the pilot won't even give him information that's on the side of an aircraft. That's more the point.
Oh.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the pilot is still sticking to this name, rank, serial number.
And you already know this information because it's visible.
Now, Hans starts to get deeper into things he already knows from pilots who have come through the facility. He starts to show the pilot his quote-unquote guest book and all the information he has about these other pilots. Hans's whole point of this is to show the pilot that these men have broken their loyalty code, so their code of conduct, and that they've provided the simplest information that is needed to move on from the interrogation center to the POW camps. Hans dives deeper into his previous intelligence knowledge to get the pilot to believe that he already knows the information needed, but he needs to fill in the blanks.
Okay.
So remember that intelligence we were talking about that these other departments have done?
Yeah.
Hans has all this information. He already knows who this pilot is sitting in front of him.
Yeah.
He knows his name, rank, and serial number. He knows the type of aircraft he's flying. He knows where the crash occurred due to witnesses. The radio transmissions, he knows his call sign in the air. He knows why the plane went down. He knows everything. He knows the formation the pilot was flying in.
He just wants the pilot to
wants the pilot to talk and fill in all the blanks.
Okay.
Now, this pilot had crashed, but he doesn't believe Hans knows the whole story, and that's why he won't tell him anything.
Yeah.
Right? But Hans already knows the details of these things, but he needs the pilot to confirm them.
Okay.
Hans tells him of the men who tried to last long enough in Auswärtsstelle West like this pilot is doing, right? This pilot's doing the American thing where I'm not telling you shit.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not telling you anything. You'll never get anything out of me.
I'm going to be a hard ass.
However, Hans makes a good point here. And this is what gets the pilot to think. And this is the end of day one of the interrogation. What Hans says is that the Americans' point of view is that they believe the longer one of their men is in these camps being interrogated, they are assuming he is talking and committing treason by giving out military secrets. Or, from the German perspective, this man is a spy and they'll kill him. So the pilot, after this first day of interrogation, goes back to the cooler, back to his cell, and he starts to think.
Well, like, he doesn't really have anything else to do.
But Hans has him thinking now about giving information so he can get out of this camp so that the Americans, his officers, his superiors,
his people,
don't think he's actually giving secrets.
Yeah.
Because, again, what Hans is asking for, what pilots have done, probably took a matter of 2-3 hours, paperwork signed, off to the POW camp, right? So that just shows, like, from the American point of view, the superior is like, okay, he was there for just a short amount of time. He probably didn't tell him anything, and he's out of there, right? But if you're there for days and days, you're probably telling them
a lot of stuff.
And that's why the pilot starts to think, well, first of all, I don't want to be considered a traitor, or I don't want to be court-martialed for treason when I get back to the United States after the war is over.
Yeah.
And second of all, I definitely don't want the Germans to think I'm a spy because I am not, and I don't want to die here.
Yeah, you're going to get killed if they think that.
Exactly. So after day one, prisoner goes back. He starts to think about things and what he needs to do to move on from here quickly. So day two, Hans starts to dive into more detailed information about other American pilots.
It's like, this is what these people have told me.
Hans starts to dive into this information that pilots already have told about their missions, their call signs in the air, the whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards. Yes. All of it.
I did it on purpose.
Well, obviously.
It fit so perfectly in this sentence. I was like,
perfect idiom.
I have got to go back to episode 2 and bring in the whole 9 yards when we're talking about fighter pilots. Self 5, Cody. So now Hans takes him on a walk, a nature walk.
Okay.
And this is, again, Hans building rapport and taking the pilot out to just walk nature.
Yeah, let's just chill.
You know, clear your mind a little bit.
Get out of this setting.
Let's get out of this, interrogation room where it's very kind of, hot and crowded, stuffy, that kind of thing. Now, as Hans is talking about this specific crash, he starts to purposefully use the wrong information so that the pilot fills in the blanks of the story.
Like, wait, no, that's not what happened.
Exactly. Because Hans already knows this pilot's whole story and what happened. Okay, he just needs to get it out of him. Hans attributes this part to the hard-headed American military psyche and attitude of correcting wrong information. Like, that's how we are as Americans.
Well, yeah.
Like, when someone gets a story wrong, we're like, no, that didn't happen like that.
Yeah. Let
me tell you how it really happened. And that's exactly what happens with this pilot.
Okay.
And the pilot doesn't even consider it as giving information. He just considers it as correcting Hans's information.
Like, wait, no, that...
But there's about to be details that the pilot's going to give that aren't part of what Hans is asking. He's going to start going deeper into stuff that he doesn't even have to say.
The blank.
Exactly. He's going to start saying stuff he doesn't even have to say because he thinks this is just a conversation with a normal guy. And all of a sudden, this whole... especially in A Walk in Nature.
Yeah, he's not being interrogated, in quotes.
It's just a conversation about what happened to him.
Yeah.
The pilot starts to fill in the blanks of his mission gone wrong. He starts to tell Hans about how he was flying in formation, about how he was protecting the bombers, how his P-51 Mustang's engine started to fail, and how he called his call sign in that he was ditching the plane and bailing out. And Hans starts to realize he's on the right track. Now Hans wants to get into some stuff that his superiors have asked him to get information about. And this has to do with the camera on board the P-51 Mustang. The camera on board in the cockpit that has the pilot's view only activates when the guns go off.
Okay.
And Hans knows that this pilot never fired a shot because his camera was empty when intelligence got it. So since there's no film, this pilot never pushed down his guns.
Yeah.
Because only when he pushes down his guns,
the camera
activates of what he's shooting in front of him. Okay? So Hans starts to use these details to get information of what his superiors want to know. And what they want to know is why there are white tracers on their bullets. So why do the tracers turn from red to white? So the tracer on a bullet, for those of you listening that don't know, there is a chemical that you can put on the tip of a bullet in which when it's fired, the streak of it has a certain color.
Okay.
Mostly they use a mixture of chemicals that it's red. So as the pilot is firing, you see red bullets flying out of the plane. However, there's also white ones.
Okay.
So Hans doesn't say, why are they white? Why do they turn white? He goes back to his intellectual abilities, and he says, man, they must have a big chemical shortage up in England that your tracers aren't shooting red anymore. And the pilot correcting him.
Wait. No.
The pilot's going to correct him now.
Yeah.
And he tells Hans, he goes, no. There's no shortage of chemicals. When the tracers turn white, it's to warn the pilot that they're almost out of ammo.
Oh, okay. So they're like red, then you're running low, so they're going to be white, so you know.
Exactly.
Genau.
When the pilot's tracers turn white, it's to warn him to get out of battle and head back to base because he needs to rearm.
Okay.
Now, the pilot has just given a huge secret to Hans without even knowing it and thinking that it's an innocent statement, but he just gave Hans a huge tactical advantage for his superiors. Because now German pilots know that when they start to see white tracers,
they're running low.
Go attack the plane because they have not much to shoot at you.
Oh.
So a huge secret is spilled right there without the pilot even knowing it. And Hans, like I said, isn't asking this directly. He brings up this whole new conversation like, oh man, you guys must be running short on supplies because your tracers have changed to white.
Yeah.
And we don't see red anymore. And he just divulges this information. So this is an exact example of how Hans, over 2 days, has built rapport, gotten the pilot to talk, and then spill a huge military secret without him even knowing that he's done that. Hans goes back to the pilot's crash. And now Hans throws everything at him. He tells him again, he knows what formation the pilot was flying in. He knows his call sign. He knows the issue that he had with the P-51 Mustang, which is one of my favorite planes in history, which was the engine failure. He tells him he knows he never fired a shot because the camera was empty. And he also tells him the exact time the plane went down because of the witnesses on the ground who watched him ditch the plane and parachute out to safety. Now, the pilot is absolutely flabbergasted. He has no idea how Hans has all this information. But again, it's from all of this German intelligence that has been gathered prior. And basically, the pilot has nothing else to say. He's like just left speechless.
Yeah, for sure.
And the pilot has willingly given him all this information now in a big military secret.
Yep.
And he doesn't even think about it. So that's Hans's method. That's our hypothetical pilot and a true story of how he got information and a big military secret out of him. Hans's accomplishments go down in interrogation history. And like I said in the beginning of the podcast, the FBI and the Air Force both utilized a lot of his tactics and changed their methods to using more friendly approaches to get answers out of people. In 1948, after World War II, Hans is invited to the United States to interrogate 2nd Lieutenant Martin J. Monty, who was on trial for treason after he stole a United States Air Force plane, flew to Milan in Italy, and surrendered to the Germans. Okay. This is how Hans first comes to the United States. The U.S. Air Force asked Scharff, because of his legacy in World War II, to interrogate this pilot. Now, this pilot lied to the United States military. He said that he was on he was trying to get behind enemy lines, that he was trying to get Nazi or German secrets, Nazi secret, whatever. But that wasn't the case. The Air Force finds out through newspapers in Germany that an American defected to join the Nazis and give them secrets of United States Air Force. So they invite Hans in 1948, that's how he gets here again, to interrogate him because they're so impressed by him. And they also are so impressed that they ask him to kind of write a curriculum, almost like an interrogation curriculum, to be used in U.S. Air Force interrogation school. Scharff becomes a U.S. citizen, and he's going to live out the rest of his days in California, specifically Los Angeles, and he spends the rest of his life creating art. And he has mosaics that still hang in the California State Capitol building, Los Angeles City Hall, and the Cinderella Castle at Walt Disney World.
Oh, interesting.
His painting career is actually just as famous as his interrogation career.
Wow.
Hans Scharff, he died in 1992, and his legacy is well known in American military world, and pilots who were interrogated by him have nothing but great things to say about Hans Scharff. In fact, when Hans was alive, he visited many pilots, and he went to a lot of Air Force reunions because he befriended so many of these pilots during interrogation that he made lifelong friends with a lot of them.
That's so crazy.
And even families of pilots that died in World War II, he's still, like, there's pictures in the book of him with the sons and daughters of the pilots he interrogated. It's kind of cool. Like, Hans Scharff, he has this whole military history, German military history, but he also has this amazing American history as a citizen of the United States. Yeah. And people just have nothing but great things to say about him. Even though he was on, like, the wrong side of the war, they understand that he was a man with a job, but they respect him mostly for his kindness in treating captives like human beings. Also, they credit him with all the information that he gathered because of how intelligent he was and how he did it without them even knowing. And they still joke about it till this day.
That's awesome.
I just think this is a cool story because it's a side of World War II you don't really talk about. We talk about Nazis versus Allies, Axis versus Allies, Japan versus America, right? Like all these terrible things, and like how, everyone just thinks like, oh, the Germans are so terrible, they're all a bunch of Nazis, and it's just not true. Like this is one of those stories I think that's important in history, is because like this is one of those things where I preach to my students about perspective, and like this is a whole different perspective of World War II, where this man has nothing but kindness in his heart. Yeah. And he's a humane character and was just caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and was forced to fight for the country he was a citizen of.
He was just fortunate that he received this job and not having to be a soldier fighting.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode on Hans Scharff. Kind of tricked you with the nice Nazi part because he's not a Nazi.
Not a Nazi.
But a very humble man who lived out the rest of his days as a U.S. citizen, a very well-liked man amongst both the German military and American military communities, and contributed a lot to American intelligence agencies. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you want to read the book and get the book, if you're really interested in the story and want to know more in detail, I really just covered the skin of this. I mean, there's so much we could have talked about today that I had to weed out.
There's a lot of post-it notes.
Yeah, I have a lot of post-it notes in this book because there's just so much little details that are so interesting that, again, like I would have had to make this like a 2-3 part podcast. Go out and find out more on your own. And again, the book is called The Interrogator, the story of Hans Joachim Scharff, Master Interrogator of the Luftwaffe. The author is Raymond F. Tolliver, and it's just such an easy read that if you are interested in what we talked about today, again, just scratching the surface of it, you'll really it's a page turner, and it's got so much information and so many cool details in there. I would recommend this to anyone who loves World War II in a heartbeat. We hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope everyone enjoys your weekend. Episode 4 is going to be a fun one. We're going to move away from American history. We're going to jump all the way over to Asia, where we are going to have a pretty cool episode, I think, about the Pirate Queen of China.
That'll be very interesting.
All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed the episode. We will see you next week. Enjoy your weekend. Go get some drinks in.
Thanks for having me.
Always.